Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. This is the first session, the kickoff of the first year experience Go to College summer series. So this is a 3-week free virtual summer series that's going to be occurring from now all the way until the end of July. And it's really just going to be getting you ready for college readiness, talking about different subjects around academics, mental health, professional development, personal well-being. We're going to be going over a lot of really awesome topics and everything. So I'm really excited to have y'all here joining us for this first session. Give yourself a pat on the back. I know it's kind of hard to get back into gears, as the academic year is starting to roll around again, but taking that first step of initiative is definitely something to give yourself a round of applause of. So definitely do that. I'm going to give y'all a round of applause. But hello, my name is Adrianna. Adrianna so Yanishiak, Ozofana Nishlanki, Ami Bashichin, Zedeshkizi Dash Chake, Oga Dashanella. Hello, everybody. I'm Adrianna. I am Navajo from Gallup, New Mexico. I am the Mendigos clan, born for the Towering House people. So shout out to all those people I'm related to. And I work with the American College Fund. So I'm a college success coach, but I also lead the first year experience program. And this programming is for students who are going into their first year of college, whether it's traditional, going from high school to college, or non-traditional as well. Those of you who might be a little older or might have not gone to college right after high school, maybe worked first, family, or just didn't go to school for a while, wanted to take a break, whatever the case is, as long as you're in this journey of getting back into the college mindset and everything, and you're just trying to get college ready, this is the programming for you. This is open to everybody, though. It's not just for those first year students. I know we have a lot of different demographics here as well. I know we have some friends, family too, who might be gathering information from those who are for those who they might know who are going to college pretty soon and everything. But yeah, this is all going to be going on for the next couple of weeks. So we're in week 1 right now, and this is the first day again. So we're really excited to get started here. So I just did a little bit of, like icebreakers here. So for those of you who didn't get the chance yet, feel free to introduce yourselves in the comments, talk about where you're tuning in from, what's your tribal affiliation, and then just share, what did you have for lunch today if you had some lunch or something. I had some rice and tuna, nothing too exciting, and some seaweed. That's been kind of a comfort meal for me that I learned in college, honestly, when I was a struggling college student. So feel free to put those in the comments if you want to. But here, yeah, we're at the first week. So everything's going to be happening today, tomorrow, and Thursday. There's going to be 1 session per week. And I tried to keep things away from Monday and Friday just because I know people dwindle around those times. So, and it's still summer as well. So I know I want to give you guys still some breaks and everything. But this first one, we're going to be talking about financial aid. Financial aid is such an important topic, especially no matter what stage you are in college. It's always important to look for more financial aid. Especially scholarships, grants, anything like that, because that's money that you get to keep that you don't have to pay back. And then, we'll go into those a little bit more. And then I think Dr. Cheromiah has some other scholarships to, recommend to you and everything. And then tomorrow, Wednesday, we'll be talking about building study habits with Sky Harper. Sky Harper is one of our student ambassadors with the College Fund. So very well versed in the college experience in general. And he just graduated as well from Drexel University. So he has a lot of things, really knowledgeable things that he'll be sharing tomorrow. And then we have a really awesome panel on Thursday about creating connections on campus, just talking about the importance of, building those connections on campus, why it's important to, introduce yourself, make a relationship with your professors, how that could benefit you, friends, community members, other like maybe organizations or businesses or people in power. I don't know if that's the right wording, but like, just somebody who you want to really get to know how to introduce yourself to them formally and to kind of create that connection with them so that somehow it'll benefit you in your academics, your career, or just in your personal life as well. And then on Thursday as well, at 4 p.m., I believe, I'll be having a first year experience social. Again, it's open to everybody, but feel free, to join. That you don't have to register for that. You just join in through the link. But feel free to join on, and that'll be happening. We'll be sending out reminders as well. Really good way to stay on topic and to stay on track with all of this is the Native Pathways account. So we have that on Instagram, Facebook, X, but I call it Twitter because I know it as Twitter. But then we can also find the registration links in our link tree. So you can find those on our social medias as well. Or you can sign up for the first year newsletter. And now I can go ahead and post those links in the chat here too. But yeah, so for every session that you attend, you actually, if you fill out the event evaluation afterwards, you get entered to win prizes. Yay, we love prizes. So we're going to be working on a tier system. So if you attend one session, you're already automatically entered to win one thing. So for right now, we have a $50 Amazon gift card. But if you're really awesome and you attend 2 sessions, you might be entered to win, or you are going to be entered to win Sony wireless headphones. If you attend 3 sessions, then you'll be entered to win a Amazon Fire tablet. And then if you're a real go-getter and you attend 4 or more sessions, which I really hope you do, you'll be entered to win the grand prize of a laptop. So again, the big thing that's going to get you to get entered into these is filling out the event evaluations. And I'll be posting more information about that after Dr. Cheromiah talks. So yeah, here we are now at the first session. So we have a really important and special guest here with us who's going to be talking about finding more financial aid for college. So we have Dr. Amanda Josanna Ray Cheromiah. She is from the village of Powati, located on the homelands of
My name is Shauna Ray.
Hi, Shauna Ray. Good to meet you. Dr. Cheromiah believes one of the greatest gifts she has as an educator, mentor, and sister is the ability to build the confidence of students, especially Indigenous youth, through storytelling, kind words, and digital media. Amanda cares deeply about giving back to her Indigenous community and transforming spaces through visual narratives, Indigenous-focused scholarships, and methodologies. Amanda served Native SOAR, an Indigenous-focused multi-generational mentorship program at the University of Arizona for over 10 years. And now she currently serves as an executive director at the newly established Center for the Future of Native Peoples at Dickinson College in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. So you can always follow her on all the Instagram and all the social medias there. I follow her on TikTok. I love her content. But yeah, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and give the virtual floor to Dr. Cheromiah, and I'll see y'all afterwards. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I am going to share my screen. Give me a second here. It's good to see everybody here in the chats. I was looking to see what everybody had for lunch. You know, I've been craving KFC like recently. So I really like their like crispy chicken and stuff and the macaroni and cheese. So that made me really hungry. I didn't even eat today. I had a nectarine this morning and that was it. So looking forward to getting some food after the session. But I'm so glad to be here with all of you. I am going to share my screen. Give me a second here. All right. So today we are talking about financial aid and in particular scholarships because it takes a lot of work to get scholarships. If you apply for a loan, it doesn't take a whole lot of work to sign the dotted line, sign your life over to a loan. But there is research required though if you do take that route. I know a lot of our Native students do opt for loans, which is another way to pay for college. But I really want to focus on scholarships today because scholarships is really important because you do not have to pay back anything. So that's why I'm always a big advocate for scholarships, and that's where I'm coming from today in this presentation. But before we get into anything, I want to introduce myself in my traditional language. Gwati se hopa, kautiuista, shashkatsana hanusta, guishi sao, ba hopa, showa wi shata, shanashi, shawa matsani. I just introduced myself in my traditional language called Karis. In the old boarding school records in Carlisle Indian Industrial School, which I'll share a little bit more about that. That's actually probably less than a mile right down the way from where I'm at. In the old records, they spelled the language Queres, but I've always known it to be spelled Keres. So it's really interesting as I'm in my job and learning more about our Indigenous relatives and my own people, my own family. I'm learning a lot about myself, and I'm sure all of you are too as you're in the summertime. Maybe you're in internships or in summer programs, or maybe you're just relaxing, getting ready for school, whatever it is, whatever you're doing. I know that we're always learning and always evolving. And so I always carry and always keep in my heart my community and my people whether I'm at home, which is at Laguna, or the village of Powati, or if I'm traveling the world. And so I really hold close to my heart my clans, which is Turkey and Roadrunner. And as I mentioned before, I'm here in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, and this is a really, really interesting place to be. So we're going to use the chat here. So what happened in Carlisle, Pennsylvania? If you can type in the chat, what do you think happened here that was significant to our Native people? So go ahead and put it in the chat. Just any guesses what happened here in Carlisle, Pennsylvania that's significant to our Indigenous community? Amal, is the mic on? Just kidding. First boarding school. Okay. Yes, it was Carlisle Indian Industrial School was the first off-reservation boarding school here in the United States. And so this school is, again, it was opened in 1879 and closed in 1918. And either 1879 or 1878, skipping me right now which the exact actual date is, but it's a school that really impacted our Native people. And I was looking at the tribal representation of those that are in here. Many of your relatives who are from your communities came to Carlisle, Pennsylvania, either forcibly or there were some actually who families sent them here to Carlisle. So it's a really interesting place to be. I'm essentially like a spectacle here in Carlisle. There's a lot of non-native people here. People will always comment or on my hat or my jewelry. Sometimes they'll even touch my hat or my jewelry, which I'm not a fan of. I don't know if that's happened to anybody here, but yeah, it's really interesting. Like when the Richard Henry Pratt was a man who brought a lot of the Indian students here to Carlisle, and he would bring them at odd hours, like on the train, like at midnight or so, because a lot of the community in Carlisle was interested in seeing the Native American people. And I could get a little glimpse of what our Native relatives experienced in that time and how they may have felt when the community of Carlisle saw them and interacted with them. Because like our relatives did back then, like there's a lot of people who are interested in who they are as people. And I find that today living in Carlisle, people are very interested in in who I am, where I come from, where I get my hat, where I buy my jewelry, how much of what I am is. And so it's interesting because I'll be at Walmart shopping and people will just stop me and be like, "Oh, are you Indian?" And I'm like, yeah, I don't identify as like Indian. I say Indian. But and then I was buying a mattress the other day because I just moved into my apartment. And this one guy was like, I have a question for you. What do you think about Native American mascots? And I'm just like buying my mattress, you know, but I feel like I have to represent all of Native America for whatever reason. And I told him, I was like, well, if you think about the Washington, right, you wouldn't put the Washington whites in there, you know, like it just doesn't make sense. And so we had this random conversation. So a lot of times people think that they're really curious about Indigenous people. And so I'm sure there might be some of you who identify with that too, where you're in spaces where you feel like you might have to represent your whole community or people just stare at you or ask you questions. Like I get so many stares here. So it's a very interesting place to be. But I work at the Center for the Futures of Native People, and here we honor our relatives who went to the Carlisle Indian Industrial School. On the left is my great great grandma, Kal Dewey. So actually, that's my Indian name. That's my namesake, comes from her. So she had two sons that actually came to Carlisle Indian School. So we are descendants of the boarding school. And this is my mom and my sister, Dr. William Ross, and my sister is a doctoral student in clinical psychology at the University of Alaska. And there's me. So once my sister gets her degree, all three of us in our family will have a PhD. So I think that's really special. So I come from a long line of people who've got degrees in various institutions and places around the country. So I think that's really important. I think that our family is so sacred and so special to us, and I hold mine very dear to me, especially as I'm here in Carlisle by myself. And so I also, this is my dissertation committee. So for those who want to get your degree or maybe get a master's or a PhD, there's people that will help you and support you all along the way. And so if sometimes it might be hard initially to make connections, but once you get involved in clubs or different scholarship organizations or different clubs, like you can really make a lot of great friends and a lot of great mentors. So this is my dissertation committee. And Tiwanima, so he is a Olympian, Louis Tiwanima. He was actually in the shadow of Jim Thorpe, but he is a Olympian, went to the Olympics twice. And so he placed in the 10,000 meter and got a silver medal, so which is pretty amazing, given that he came from this small village called Sonumkavi in Hopi, which is on Second Mesa. And so I might have pronounced that wrong. But so yeah, so he definitely inspires me as I'm here in Carlisle. I actually did a run over there in Second Mesa. I don't know if any of you are runners. Oh my gosh, that is a hard run. It's only about 6 and something miles. And so, but you're running at like 6,500 feet. So if there's some runners out there, I challenge you to run Tiwanima's race in September. So as I share a little bit more about my journey, I went to college at the University of Arizona, got my bachelor's in communications, my master's and PhD in higher education. And I just really loved school. I loved being a part of the campus community. When I was getting my master's and my PhD, I actually earned over $85,000 worth of scholarship money to help pay for school and finish debt-free. And so I learned a lot of tips and tricks along the way of how to share my story on paper, how to submit different documentation, how to get that all together. So this presentation is really designed, it's like the behind the scenes how-to tips and tricks about applying for scholarships. So I hope these really resonate with you. And if anything, it really will help you and hopefully empower you to share your story as an Indigenous person or as a relative from your community. And I always like to start this. If there's nothing else you remember about this presentation, I hope you remember these kind words, because I really believe these words are for you and for our relatives, for our community. But I want you to keep in mind that you are brilliant, that you are brave, that you are courageous, that you are remarkable, that you are sacred, and that you are greatly loved. So I really respect you and honor you for coming to this space here at the beginning of the week. And here we are learning about college, talking about scholarships, and I honor you. That is such an amazing thing to do because you want to learn more. And I really respect that and honor that. And remember that you are greatly loved. So as we go into this section here, I think it's really important to understand like how to tell stories, but not just stories, but how to do it in a powerful, impactful way. So I love sharing stories. I share all kinds of random stories. I use TikTok and Instagram usually to share my stories. TikTok is a very fascinating platform. And I've connected with a lot of our Native relatives through TikTok. And what's interesting is that I think about like, what's the void, right? Like, what are stories that people aren't telling? And so when I make stories, not everything goes viral or whatever, not everything gets like thousands of views, but there are some stories that really resonate with people and they're really random sometimes. Like how I think about it is random. Like one time I shared a story about what it's like to do laundry in Gallup, New Mexico. So I shared about the laundromat. And then I shared another story about 5 romantic things, romantic gestures that Native men have shared with me or done. And so I shared this random story, but that got like over 50,000 views. It's so fascinating. Like, and then I've shared stories about like how I've gone and done runs like Tiwanima's run, or how I've gone and done a marathon in Hawaii. And I've shared just different narratives about my life. And so just think about like, as you consider your own story, think about your own position and the part of the world that you occupy. You know, what is unique about you? Do you do subsistence type of fishing or hunting or gathering? Like, is that an important way of life for you and your family? Like, that's awesome. Like, or do you have a record collection of maybe like 100 records and you understand how music works and how these different elements are combined together? That's super cool. Do you babysit your cousins or your brothers and sisters and do that for the summer? That's also really remarkable because you have a lot of responsibility. So there's a lot of different things. Think about your own life and thinking about where you go, think about who you associate with, because that will really start to help you understand of how to tell your story and share stories that people aren't hearing that often. So I have this activity. Let's see if we can do it virtual here. So I want to imagine that all of us here in this Zoom room are applying for the same scholarship that's worth $7,000. So the goal is for, I would do this in person, but imagine us all standing up. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a statement. And if you identify with this statement exactly, you would remain standing. So the way that we'll do this here is I'm going to put a statement in the chat. And then pretend that we're all standing. And if you would sit down, imagine yourself like sitting down. I want you to put in the chat, I sat down. But if you identify with this statement, I want you to put in the chat, I am still up, I'm still standing, okay? So I'm going to put here, I'm pretending I'm going to put this in a scholarship essay that we're all applying for. So I'm going to put a statement that I have a visual impairment that impacts my daily life. Okay, so I'm going to type this in here again. Daily life. Okay, so, all right, I want you to use the chat function. If you identify with me, again, put I'm still standing. And if you don't identify with me, say I sat down. I'm sitting down. Okay, good, Todd Wilcox. Okay, I sat down. All right, sitting down. Oh, you're still standing. Okay, Cassidy. All right, I sat down. I'm sitting down. Okay, I'm standing. All right. So there's a couple folks in here that are standing. Okay, so that means that there's a few folks in here that can identify with the statement that I have. All right, so I'm gonna add more to my story, okay? So those that are still standing, I'm gonna add another statement here. So I am the daughter of a former FBI agent. Okay. For those that are still standing, are you still standing or are you sitting down? Sat down? Okay. All right. Oh, standing. Whoa, Casey. Okay, look at all of you here. All right. So so you can kind of get the idea here, right? Like I'm putting statements in here that are very unique to my story, right? Most of you sat down when I had this virtually sat down when I put these statements in here, and some of you were still there. But as I provide more details of my life, you become more and more and more crafting your own story where nobody else identifies with it but you in the context of your details that you're sharing. Sure, there's themes like some of you may be first generation students, the first to go to college in your family. That is a very common experience among our Indigenous people. But as you share more of those details, maybe you grew up without running water, electricity, or maybe you grew up overseas or maybe there's all those details as you keep adding and adding and adding. It makes it so unique to you. Your story would be so unique and ultimately stand out above all the other applications. That's the goal, right? You want your story to go to the top of the pile where they're like, yep, I'm going to fund that person. Yep, I'm going to fund you because your story is, oh, it's all good, Casey. Your story is so unique, right? And so, again, you think about, I just use examples here from my own life, but again, let's take one participant here. Okay, so I'm just going to pick somebody from the chat and I want you to put in a statement here that just applies to you. It could be something about your life. Okay, let's do Emily Gist, G-I-S-T. Put one statement here in the chat and let's see if we can identify with it. So again, if we identify with Emily, we virtually sit down. But if we do identify with her, then we virtually stand up. Okay, so Emily, if you could put in a statement in there, and it could be something very simple. I am the daughter of a single parent. Okay, so if you identify with her, stay standing up, and if you don't, sit down. So I identify, I'm standing up, standing. Oh, okay, sat down. Sitting down, sitting down. Okay, still standing. All right, give us one more statement, Emily. Let's see if you can. I think something that's very unique to you. Think about your what you like to do, or it's up to you, whatever statement you like. So this kind of just gives you an idea, right? Sat down. All right, Emily, let's give us one more statement and then we'll see if we're standing up or sitting down. I sat down. Okay, so give her a little bit of time here to put something in there. So as she's doing that again, remember your statements, you want to be very unique and provide very specific things. I'm aiming for a career in forensic psychology. Oh my gosh, how cool is that? I'm sitting down. That is not my career track. Sat down. All right, very cool. Look at all of us sitting down. All right, very good job, Emily. Very good job. That sat most of us down, I think. Yeah, all right. So your statement is going to the top of your story is going to the top of the stack there. All right, very good job, Emily. Okay, so I hopefully that gives you a demonstration, that gives you an idea. Again, your statements are very specific to you, right? And you want to make it as detailed as possible when you're sharing your stories. So good job. Thanks, Emily, for participating, and everybody else. So again, when you think about like our positionality, which is your position, how you perceive the world that's around you. Again, for me, centering, this is Carlisle Indian Industrial School. So this is one of a famous photograph of our Native relatives that came to the school, which is right down the road. The former grounds is right down the road. Right now it's an army base, but our Indian relatives were here. So when I look, let's use the chat again. How would you describe this picture? And let's use the chat. You can use a word or two. How would you describe this image right here? How would you describe the students here? Depressing, okay. What else? Resilient, gray and bleak, yep. Stolen lives. Stolen, change, unique, okay. Yeah, this is a very powerful image here. A lot of times our indigenous relatives, especially in the boarding school era, and boarding school spans across many, many, many decades. But in particular for this boarding school, in this time period, a lot of our indigenous relatives did not have the opportunity to share their own stories. Like the photographer, John Cho, who's a non-native person, would take these photographs and he would tell the stories of the native people that oftentimes were inaccurate or had a specific agenda to it. And so, but now though, we have the opportunity as relatives, as indigenous relatives, to share our story our way. For example, I could open up the TikTok app right now and I can make a story about the jewelry I have on right now and where I got it from, right? Like I can make a story of like the pictures that are hanging up here in the office and why I put them up, right? There's tons of ways you can tell stories. And so, but we have the power, the agency, the ability to share our story our way. So I hope that this encourages you when you're sharing your own story, whether if it's like in person, whether you're giving a presentation or you're applying for scholarships in a written format. Like your story is so precious and so sacred. So I hope that you remember that as you apply for these different opportunities. And knowing that within our indigenous communities, and this is of course going to be specific to your own community, but that there is this sacred innate knowledge and direction that's inside of us. That's what I truly believe, because there is evidence, there are stories, there are our relatives that have shared these different elements with us. Like this here is a picture of what? Who can put it in the chat? What is this picture here of? Go ahead, put it in the chat. Who can identify this picture, where it is? This is actually my own photograph. I actually take pictures. I have a visual impairment and I take pictures. That's another story I've used in my scholarships. So Canyon de Shane, no, good guess, good guess. Mesa Verde. Good job, Kevin. I'll give you a piece of candy if we were in person. Good job. Yes, Mesa Verde, which is right outside of Cortez, Colorado. So this is my Pueblo relatives and also Chaco Canyon. These are the very footprints of my ancestors. And so again, it's just an image. Again, each community is so different, and you have your own sacred places and mountains and rivers and other places, animals. And so, but the takeaway message is that there's this knowledge inside of us, that you have these skills inside of you that our ancestors have and will continue to have. I think that is very precious and very, very sacred. Oh, that's an hour away. Nice. Very cool. And so with when we think about indigenous history, right, native history, what happened in 1680 in the land we now know as New Mexico? So does anybody know what happened in 1680? I'm curious to see if anybody knows what happened here. Oh, the revolt. Good job, Marlene. Yes, the Pueblo Revolt. So again, this is specific to my own positionality in the world, but the Pueblo Revolt essentially in 1680, our Pueblo people and what we now know as the land of New Mexico gathered together to rise up against the colonizers, against the Spaniards that were coming up from what we now know as Mexico. And so there was very calculated. There were runners that had yucca that helped to determine the time of the revolt. And so the Pueblo people overthrew those that were coming to conquer the land. And so what I believe, in my opinion, is that it was such a unique experience that it positioned our people in a way. For example, out of all the indigenous people in our country, Secretary Deb Haaland is from our Pueblo community of Laguna. So I think that is so very special. And again, like, think about your own history, think about your own relatives. Like, how does that position you as a student, as a leader, as a relative? And so a lot of times, again, going back to my family, my grandmas are so important to me. Here's pictures of different grandmas that are in my life. One has passed on, some of them have passed on. But I integrate that story into my journey, into my academic journey, right? Sometimes when you're in classes or you're writing essays, you're learning about like Western history, learning about all this like art that's like from across the seas, like all this stuff, right? And it oftentimes, unless it's the native narrative is sometimes missing, right? Like even last night, like I was watching the Republican convention, and the stories of Asian Americans and the stories of Native Americans, indigenous people in our country were silent. I didn't hear I think there might have been one mention maybe of an Asian American of some sort. So oftentimes our narrative as indigenous people are very silent. And so, but as a scholar, as a student, you have the opportunity to bring in your way of life into the classroom. Sometimes it can be scary. Sometimes it's very empowering, but you'll learn to find your voice in these different ways. And so the way that I've did that in my dissertation, again, dissertation is a big research project. I used my grandma's stories as a model. And so I made a model out of it, Grandma's Kitchen Table Effect models. When I was working with my participants, the way that I treated them was the way that my grandma treated me, and at her kitchen table in particular. And when I think about her table, she creates a loving, warm, and welcoming environment at her kitchen table, which it helps me feel safe, and I feel worthy, and I feel loved and important. And what happens is that stories naturally unfold and trustworthiness and respect are established. And with that, we are preserving through storytelling our way of life. And so again, this is not my model. This is my grandma's model. Like, this is their model. All I did was articulate it on paper, which took some time, and I hired a graphic designer to create this too. But so that kind of gives you an idea of like how you can integrate, right, your own stories into academics, right? Like it's such a part of who we are as indigenous people, our relatives, right? And so other ways too that I've done this is creating posters that are written in indigenous languages. Like this is Elodia, she's Yaqui. This was written in her language. And then here's Kyle on the left, written in the Athabascan language. And then Maria, written in the O'odham language. And then Hopi, there's Sema, written in the Hopi language. So those are just ways to celebrate, ways to express ourselves. Again, like my whole vision, right, is to amplify our narratives as Indigenous people, because I remember that our relatives didn't always have the chance to do that, especially in the boarding school era at Carlisle. And so these are just ideas to help you kind of think about how you can share your story. Again, this is specific to my journey, but it's an example, and I hope it inspires you to think about how you can integrate your own culture and your own way of life and being into stories, into the academic world. And so as we go into here, I'm going to talk more about like navigating the scholarship processes. So this is more of the how-to, this is more of the taking notes type of thing, because this is what I've learned, and this is what has helped me get thousands and thousands of dollars to finish school debt-free. So let's jump into navigating the scholarship process. So the way I think about scholarships, it's like ingredients. Like if you're making have a recipe and you have different ingredients, there's different pieces that make up a scholarship. And it varies, right? It's so different. Like the Cobell Scholarship has a different requirement than Native Forward, than the American Indian College Fund, than the American Indian Education Fund. Like everyone is so different. But there are some common elements that are woven together within scholarship applications. So some elements may include like the application, of course, letters of recommendation, essay questions, a degree check, which is basically like a checklist. Like a lot of times colleges will have like a long list of classes that you should be taking for your major, your minor. And then when you graduate, you often need like a degree check to make sure that you're on track to graduate. But so that's something to look into if you don't know what that is. Certificate of admission to prove that you're actually admitted into the school. Also looking at like a nomination or a nominating form of sorts. Sometimes that's a part of it. Also, a list of different awards or honors that's often asked for in scholarships, community involvement, community service, work experience too. Test scores is also something too sometimes scholarships ask for, but also tasks like an interview an elder, like that was a really cool task that I had for one scholarships, sometimes transcripts, headshots, thank you letters. So there's a lot of different elements here, but those are some most common elements that are asked for in scholarships. And it's hard, it can be hard to figure out where to start, right? You could go to Google, you could put in Native American scholarships, some of these will pop up, but here's a list that I've curated that I put together that that'll give you a really good start to go look and find those scholarships. So Cobell, Native Forward, American Indian College Fund, American Indian Science and Engineering Society, for those that are interested in science, technology, engineering, and math, that's where you should go for sure. Chasing the Dream, American Indian Education Fund, American Indian Services, the Udall undergraduate scholarships, and that's for those that are interested in public service. That's a really good place to look. The Gates Millennium Scholarship, Native Graduate Health Fellowship. Of course, your tribal specific scholarships too are really important to consider and to look into and research, and then also Indian Health Services Scholarship. So those are great places to start. And when I look at these different scholarships here, again, like there's some that are easier to join. To apply for, like the American Indian Education Fund. Like that one took me a lot less time. It probably only took me like maybe 1 or 2 hours to apply for that scholarship. But what I did though, the Cobell Scholarship, oh my goodness, that took me probably like 40 hours to complete, because they had something like 30 something questions and asked a lot of different different parts of your life as a student and as a community member. So what I would do though is that I would take my responses that I had for the Cobell Scholarship and insert it into some of the questions of the American Indian Education Fund. Yes, you can do that. It's your story. You're writing your story. So I would cut and paste some of those responses and I would tailor it though to each scholarship. So yeah, that kind of gives you an idea of like where to start. So 5 common mistakes made on scholarship applications. Here's some of them that I've identified. Students do not follow submission guidelines. That is like a big, big thing. Just read it literally. If they tell you to do X, Y, and Z, you do X, Y, and Z. Nothing more, nothing less. That's exactly what they're asking for. And so a lot of times students won't submit everything, so then they'll already be disqualified. So just make sure you follow, a lot of them have some of the checklists, make sure you follow the checklist and get everything in that you needed by the deadline too. Also, the personal statement is too generic and does not answer the scholarship questions. So as I've reviewed scholarship applications, like a common question will be describe your academic journey, your personal and academic journey. That's a very common question. And so if you keep at those, think of it like a funnel. If you think about those generic statements like, I am an Indigenous person, okay, that's pretty generic, right? There's a lot of us that identify as Indigenous. Or if you say like, I like to help people, okay, that's still very generic. I serve in a club, like a club at school, not a club like a club, like I serve in a club after school. Still very generic. That's like, thousands of students do that, right? But then if you go back to our example, like with Emily, right? Like I have a career interest in, I forget what it was, psychology. I forget what exactly it was, criminology. I can't remember. Or I have an interest in becoming an FBI agent to go back to communities and make the justice system more equitable. Like that's a very specific thing. Or I'm interested in healthcare because I have taken care of my elderly parents for over 10 years and I've understood more about how to navigate the healthcare system through them. That's a very specific example, right? So do you see what I'm saying? Like those specific examples, again, that's where the money's at. That's the money maker right there, those specific examples. Some other mistakes is that students don't make the deadline. That's a big one. And that there are also gaps in students' educational records. So sometimes right, with COVID, some students took a break, right? A much needed break because it was too much to go back to school for whatever reason. And sometimes when you're applying for scholarships and you don't share why there's a break in your education, on the reviewer side, it could look like, oh, well, they just didn't continue to go to school. If there's no context to that, it just leaves a lot of questions, and you don't want to leave the reviewer a lot of questions. So even if you put in there like, I have elderly parents and COVID really impacted my family and my community, I had to take a 2-year break from school. Now I'm going back, things are more stable. So do you see how that provides a lot more context to your academic record, your academic portfolio as you're applying for a scholarship? So if that happens to you or has happened, make sure you put that in there. And then also too, another mistake is that there's just sloppiness. There's no edits done. You got to make sure that you review your scholarship applications because, again, remember, there's a lot of people that are applying for these scholarships, that are applying for this money, and you want to do the best that you can, also grammatically, but then also providing those very specific details for your story. All right, so tips and tricks to strengthen your scholarship application. So there's no rhyme or reason here. I literally just put these all in bullet points. And so we'll go through this here. But as we look at the tips and tricks, create a system to have frequently requested items accessible. So for example, like updating documents like a certificate of blood, transcripts, your certificate of admission, even if you just have create a folder or even on a jump drive or maybe on Google Drive, whatever, have a folder that has all your frequently asked documents, transcripts, unofficial transcripts is also a frequently asked document. And so if you have that readily available, it just makes it really easy as you're applying for all these different scholarships. You're like, okay, I can go back to that folder, get them what I need. So, and then I also included a headshot too, in my system, my folder, sometimes they would ask for headshots. So I had 1 or 2 photos that I would rotate that I would have in this online file of all my frequently used documents. So that's also really helpful. Create a table to keep track of scholarship deadlines and making sure that you put any kind of info there. So I applied for something like 20 scholarships or something. So it's hard to keep track just in your mind about like what each scholarship has and what they require, their deadlines. So even just creating like a chart, even just using Excel or just make a table on Microsoft Word, keep track of the scholarships that you're applying for. That's really, really helpful. Also, reuse personal statements for other scholarships. Like I gave you the example, like the Cobell was a really long scholarship. So I would often take a lot of those responses and just move them over to some other scholarships I was applying for. But again, you have to remember that each scholarship, your responses have to be tailored to that scholarship. Like you just can't cut and paste. It's like applying for a job. Like if I'm applying for a job in a marketing department, it would be a different application if I was applying for a job in a STEM lab, like a microbiology lab or something. Like those are two very different types of positions, and your document should reflect that position. So just like with scholarships, very different scholarships, but your documents need to reflect what they're asking for and who they represent. Other things too, so have folks proofread scholarship essays. That is so important. I would have like one of my mentors look at it. I would spread the love. I would even just ask like one relative to look at, like when I was doing my dissertation, I would ask like one relative to look at pages X through Z, and then I would ask another relative to read like chapter whatever, and then they would have like, I would break it up. So I don't know. So there's different ways that you could go about doing that, but having people review is so important. Also asking for recommenders. The recommenders are so important because a lot of scholarships will ask for that. A lot of times I get students asking me like, oh, can you recommend me? And I'm like, I haven't talked to you in like 5 years. I don't even know what's going on. Like we had like a moment in time where they were part of like our native SOAR program, which was like a few years ago. And this actually happened recently. And one of those students from like 4 years ago asked me to write her a letter of recommendation. And I was like, in good faith, I can't, because I don't know what you've done the last 4 years. I can't really attest to your work experience now. Like, is there somebody else, like a supervisor who can provide more details than I could? And so I actually told her no, because there was somebody else that could do it better than me and attest to her skills a lot better. So make sure you ask people who know you, who can attest to your skills, like recent skills too. But also another thing too, though, is that if you do ask somebody who you worked with like years ago, if you're willing to provide like a profile of like everything you've done, like, and that could be like in a CV or a resume, that can also help to the recommender who could write one for you, even though you worked with them like a few years ago or something. So it's kind of case by case, but just kind of keep that in mind. Also, oh yeah, I already mentioned this too, that each scholarship essay should be uniquely tailored to each scholarship. And then also, this is really important, this last one here, is to quantify your statements when possible. Again, like if you just say, I helped people, that is very broad, that 1,000 students can relate to that. But if you put numbers into it, if you quantify it, right? Like I put here as an example, like I assisted 35 elders for over 40 hours at a local tribal event. That gives a lot of breadth and depth to your abilities to serve, to help. So again, you could have just said, I assisted elders at an event. Okay, thousands of students can relate to that. But if you put, though, it was 35 elders, right, for over 40 hours, that speaks volumes about you, and it gives more detail. So again, use this tip also on your CV and your resume. So if you don't understand, like, so a resume is typically like 1 to 2 pages of your qualifications, your education, your skills. On a CV, sometimes you hear like curriculum vitae, like that is a longer document that typically has stuff like your academic publications, your research experience. It's a lot longer document. So that's the difference between the two, if you didn't know that. But on the CV or resume, like just quantify those statements. That's so important. It helps tells your story in very, very powerful ways. So here's some samples that I pulled from my own journey here. This is at the graduate level. Again, like when you're a first year student, like I would not have created something like this my freshman year at the University of Arizona. Like I remember the essay I wrote, like one essay I wrote was about the transformation of toothpaste in one of my classes. So it's like, so for going from that, from toothpaste to like this and being able to articulate who I am on paper is a big difference. And so again, this is writing from that master's PhD perspective, but the mechanics of what I've done can relate to whatever, if you're a high school student or a first year student. So just think about this. So I'll show you how I went through this here. So with this story I put on this paper, the requirement was it's a fellowship through the University of Arizona, and it was a $25,000 fellowship. It provided like 3 or 4 questions, and it said, you know, so answer these questions in a cover page, provide a cover page, and no more than 2 pages. That was the requirement. And so what I did though, that first page, I used it to my advantage. Like I put my logo there and I put a statement of essentially who I am and what I care about. And so I was very strategic with that because I knew it was like a free page essentially, right? Like, and it was telling my story without taking up like more pages than they asked for. And so I put that there. And then I think about my name. So Amanda Royce, Josanna Ray Cheromiah. My name is very sacred to me because it honors all my relatives. And so even on my email signature, I put all of my names and I share more about who I am through my name in my email signature. So like the signature that I have now for the work that I'm doing is, it took me about 2.5 hours to craft just my email signature. But what I put in there are all my names. I put my clans in there. I put my Indian names in there. I spell it phonetically, like just how it sounds. And I also put that I'm a descendant of 4 relatives who went to the Carlisle Indian School in that statement. And so it was important for me to honor my relatives in my email signature. So again, this is another way to kind of think about like how you share your story on paper. And so that's what I did. So I try to use all my names because I know that I'm honoring my paternal and maternal grandparents in my family lineage. So this is what it looks like here. And so then the pages, I'm gonna go to this page right here. And this is one of the paragraphs. I use headers on this one, but I'll just read like just a little bit here to kind of give you an idea of an example. So according to the 2014 Native Youth Report issued by the United States Executive Office of the President, Native youth and Native education are in a state of emergency. Low rates of educational attainment perpetuate a cycle of limited opportunity for higher education or economic success for American Indian and Alaskan Natives. Understanding the critical need for initiatives designed to serve American Indian students, my greatest accomplishment is the service I have provided to the community on campus, locally and on a national level. Since 2013, I have been thoroughly involved in the Native SOAR program as a master's graduate student and now as the graduate program director. Native SOAR is a multi-generational mentoring initiative through the College of Education that is designed to engage middle and high school, undergraduate, and graduate students, American Indian students. I have contributed to the collective effort of increasing the number of American Indian youth who enter post-secondary institutions and strengthen their self-efficacy through mentorship, outreach, and culturally relevant curriculum. Since 2014, Native SOAR staff and students have dedicated over 5,000 hours worth of near-peer mentoring for K through 12 students. Through Native SOAR, I've also contributed to increasing the retention, persistence, and graduation rates of American Indian undergraduate students at the UA. So that gives you just a little bit there. So how I constructed this paragraph is that I interwove like a very compelling statistic at the very beginning. And then I connected it to my own story and recognizing the gap, like that there needs to be more Native people in college who enter college, who stay in college, and who graduate from college. And so I integrate that, and then I give the example of Native SOAR, and I provide some statistics from the program because I was a part of that contribution. So it shows you like that I'm tying this all together. And again, this is written for at a master. This was during my PhD. So again, this written work, like I wouldn't have been able to write like this as a freshman student coming out of high school. But what you can learn, again, the mechanics of it is that you can integrate. And for example, I just integrated an interesting fact. It could be a fact from your community, it could be a fact from your school. And another statistic that I used too was that in my scholarships was that out of those who enter into a PhD program, only 0.001% are American Indian students who earn a degree in higher education, which is my degree. So that's also another stat that I've used in other paragraphs and other scholarship essays. So that kind of gives you an example here of like how you integrate. And then something else too that I've sometimes you can do this if you're submitting this, you can bold stuff. If you're using like a scholarship portal, you won't be able to because everything will be generic and imported, but there's some opportunities to also, you know, stylistically integrate this. Like here, I have at the very bottom, I directed a digital story that received national recognition from the White House. So that was that happened when I was a master's student. So that was significant to me. But I hope that this gives you an idea again of like a scholarship essay that I submitted. I did get the fellowship, which was $25,000. It covered my entire tuition for a year when I was in graduate school, and it provided extra money for living expenses, for books, supplies. So that was awesome. So I know that I did some things right on here. So again, it's again about telling your story, telling like what, you know, who you are. Think about the life-changing moments that really made you you. You know, like identified as my mom being she was a single mother for many, many years, and that was hard many times. And you know, I could share stories from like how we used to go to the grocery store in Farmington, New Mexico on our bikes, and because we didn't have a car, and me and my sister would hold groceries in our little backpacks. You know, we were only like in kindergarten, first, second grade. And my mom would put like light stuff like toilet paper and Kleenex in our backpacks, and we would ride home with our groceries. And you know, that's a significant moment to me, you know. And then I would share like from that, I've learned about the resilience and the persistence that my mom had and carried so that we could survive. And that inspires me today as a student to carry those same values. So do you see how I just made up that? Well, I didn't make up that story. That is an example from my life, but I just showed you like, there's the example. How does it impact you? And like, what are you going to do with that now? Another thing that I've used too, STAR, STAR, it's an interview method, but like S, if you can remember the acronym, like you use this in interviews, but you can also use it in writing. So S, you can describe the situation. T, describe the tasks that were involved in that situation. A is the actions, and then the results from those actions. So again, S, situation, T, tasks, A, actions, and R, results. So that's also another way to think about this too. So I hope that helps you kind of think about like how to share stories too. And then some scholarships have like names, they're named after people. This was after Dr. Maria Teresa Velez. And so how the last paragraph, I just shared like how I will honor her legacy. And I believe to this very day, even though I'm not in school, that I still honor her legacy because I'm in a place where I'm giving back to my community, and I'm situated where I want to bring more natives in our community here to Carlisle to grapple to understand more about the boarding school, and in particular the Indian school here. And so I honor her, and I feel like I am doing that now, as well as the other, like Mrs. Eloise Cobell's another scholarship that was named after her, and I got that scholarship, and I feel like I know that I'm honoring her now in this position. And so that's how I think about it. That's how I write about it. And again, I've bolded here too, like there's things here to like at the very end. When you invest in scholars like me, you are investing into collective vision of we. And again, that's like, it's not just me. Like I know that the schooling that I went for, that I got, like that it impacts a lot of us. And I think that's true. I believe that I'm an agent of change, and I receive a lot of that feedback on TikTok. If you're on TikTok, let's connect. I learn a lot from TikTok, honestly, from our Native community. But as I close here, this is just a screenshot of, it's not beautiful, it's not anything elaborate or extravagant, but it's like an example of my 2021 folder that I had. And it's not even all organized, but somehow I figured out how to navigate it. So I have like my scholarship names and some of the documents there. So that just gives you an example. It doesn't have to be pretty, at least whatever works for you, let it work for you. So that gives you an example. But Again, I'm so honored to be here with all of you, and I hope you learned a few things. But again, I hope you remember that you were greatly loved and that you were so sacred. And here's my contact information if you want to chat a little bit more, want to connect. I look forward to hearing some feedback, and I just thank you so much for spending time with me today. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think we had a question in the chat from Deborah.
Yes.
So can there be a general letter of recommendation from someone, or do I actually ask them to write 15 letters for each scholarship?
Ooh, that's a good question. A lot of times what I've done, okay, sometimes recommenders will have you write the letter first and then they'll go and edit it. So that is one method that I've used that I know some recommenders have asked me to do. So what I've done, like there's some people like my faculty mentor, Dr. Jenny Lee. So she knew I was applying for like all these scholarships. So we had a template actually where she wrote everything out, and then she gave me permission that as I was applying for scholarships, that I could take out the scholarship name and put in the new scholarship name. And I would tell her like, hey, just so you know, like I'm applying for this other scholarship. I'll use the template that we have, put in the new scholarship name, and I'm going to submit it. And she's like, great, that's perfect. So that was another example where, because like what she's saying about you remains the same no matter for which scholarship, like, but it might change again. Like if there's certain scholarships that maybe are worth more money, that might be a different letter to and maybe a different tone. But typically what I've done was just, like we had a template, and then because I was applying for so much, she was just like, yep, just change out the name, everything's good to go. And then I would submit the new scholarship recommender letter. So there's different ways to go about it, but that's kind of how I had navigated that. Enjoyed hearing my voice. Is there any other questions? Just making sure I'm going through. Okay, I don't think there's any more. I don't think I see anything.
Yeah, but thank you all for the participation in the chat. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Dr. Cheromiah. I'm pretty sure she'll be more than willing to help you all with anything. Follow her on all the social medias and everything. Love the content. But yes, yeah, thank you so much for sharing all the wisdom and all the tips and tricks and everything. Scholarships are definitely the way to go. And there's a lot of them out there. There's a lot of them that are named very similarly. We get a lot of confusion with ours too. But it's a lot of work, but it definitely does pay off, because in the end, you can fully fund yourself off of scholarships when you're going into higher education, all the way up to your doctorate program if you want to go that far, which you can see yourself there. But yes, thank you. Yeah, thank you again, Dr. Cheromiah, and thank you all so much for attending this first session. We're not quite done here. I have a few more things to share, but we're almost done. So so that again, today was the more financial aid for college. Tomorrow we'll be kicking off again with building study habits with Sky Harper. Again, Sky Harper is one of our college fund student ambassadors, and he has a lot of really great wisdom as well, just on academic success and everything. So he'll be kicking us off again tomorrow at 2 p.m. And then Thursday we'll be having the Creating Connections Campus panel on Thursday at 2 p.m. And then following at 4 o'clock on Thursday, we'll be having a social as well. So everybody's invited. It's kind of just like a more casual area to come in and meet other people, meet me, ask any questions if you have any, or want to reflect on any of the information that you heard or any of the stories that you're going to hear as well. Feel free to come and join us. But yeah, again, this session is recorded, so we'll be posting this on our YouTube channel if you want to go back and rewatch it or share it with other people who might find this very beneficial. I mean, I'm going to go back and watch it. But yeah, thank you again for attending. Please scan this QR code for the event evaluation. Again, if you have any questions or want to give any feedback or say any appreciations to Dr. Cheromiah, you can totally put that there. But this is going to be your ticket as well to punch in for the door prizes. And again, the more sessions you attend, the bigger prizes they get. So definitely try to complete those every single time. Okay, I think we have one more question. Fellowships, programs versus scholarships.
So fellowships are typically for graduate level students, typically like PhD level, sometimes a master's level. So fellowships essentially like are offered, they're typically higher like funding that's given. And so scholarship is usually, and sometimes fellowships can be for multiple years too. A lot of times the scholarships are like 1 year or like one semester type of funding, but fellowships can extend like beyond like usually a year, sometimes 2 years, maybe 3 years. Like my sister just recently got a fellowship as a doctoral student, and it covers like a lot of her expenses for like 3 years. And there's like conferences that she could go to as a part of that fellowship. So usually there's like other benefits too. Scholarships are similar sometimes because there's other benefits too. Like some scholarships, like at my institution, University of Arizona, they would have other benefits. Like they would have like community gatherings, they would have food for us. Like that was really cool too. So in the sense, like I think in my opinion, like scholarships are like more kind of one-time funding, you can reapply. But fellowships are definitely for that PhD level usually and have a little bit more benefits associated to it.
All right, thank you. Yes, very important to differentiate. Thank you for all the questions and thank you for all the audience participation. I know it's always kind of weird doing it in virtual platform, but the more we can utilize the chat, that's really awesome. So thank y'all for doing that. And again, yes, please fill out the event evaluation. That's going to be your ticket to get into the door prizes. And we'll be kicking off again tomorrow at 2 p.m. So I hope to see y'all there. I did share the link for all the registrations. Again, you can always follow us on Native Pathways on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter if you want to get more updates on that as well. But yeah, I hope you all have a great rest of your evening and get some rest, get some water, get some food, and try to stay cool if you're in really hot areas. So I know I definitely am. So yeah, we'll see y'all. Have a good evening and we'll see you again tomorrow. Thanks.